Hi everyone, my name is Sharon Gosling and I'm the author of The House of Hidden Wonders. It's a story set in Victorian Edinburgh and I thought I'd read you the prologue in the first chapter. So here we go. Prologue. The ghost and her demon move in silence, hidden by shadows, cloaked in night. Down the long columns of darkness they drift, unseen, unheard. The rain does not touch them, neither does the chill wind. Despite the hour, the streets are busy, but no one notices them. No one calls after them or points them out. They are as invisible as the silver moon once hidden behind a storm cloud. The ghost keeps moving. This place is not dark enough for her, nor the one after, nor even the next or the next. She has no home, nowhere to rest. She wanders seeking, a restless spirit. There is no place where she belongs. Somewhere behind her a great clock strikes 12, its bell clanging into the gloom. It is midnight, the witching hour, the time when spirits rise. Her demon chatters, then quiets. A crack appears in the darkness beside her, a passageway to the underworld. The ghost and her demon float in and on. Way down deep they go, then deeper still, into the midnight dark. Chapter 1. "Run!" Zinni shouted over her shoulder. "He'll never catch us," Nell shouted back as she dithered after Zinni. "He ain't got a chance." "Stop messing about, Nell," Zinni ordered her little sister. "Just run. Sadie, you too." She could hear their footsteps thundering behind her as they fled through the twilight. Above their heads, the castle loomed, the yellow sandstone of its slabs turning black in the setting sun. She jinked a sharp left, and there ahead were the steps of Castle Wynd. Zinni glanced behind her. Sadie still looked fresh, but Nell was puffing hard, beads of sweat gleaming on her forehead. Zinni frowned. It wasn't like Nell to be slow. Usually her feet were as quick as her tongue. Further behind, she could see the lawman gaining on them. "We won't make it," Zinni thought, trying to catch her breath. "Not like this." She paused, letting Sadie and Nell pass her. As they did, Zinni hooked the silver watch out of her pocket and slipped it into the fold of Nell's grubby pinafore. "Keep going," she told them. "Don't look back. Split up in the market and hide. Don't go straight home. He might follow." "What about you?" Sadie cried. "I'll be right behind you. Go!" Sadie grabbed Nell's hand and pulled her up the steps, taking them two at a time. Zinni followed, but slowly, making sure the constable had her in his sights. When he came puffing onto the steps, she faked a stumble, as if she'd slipped and fallen. She tugged her cap down, lower over her eyes, stayed down for a beat, too, waiting until he was almost level with her. "You boy," the policeman called weakly, wheezing his way up the steps, his cheeks red with the effort of the chase. "Stop in the name of the law. Zinni kicked out with her foot, catching his ankle just hard enough that he buckled to his knees with an oof. Then she was away, streaking up the worn stone steps, dodging in and out of the shadows and around curious onlookers until she'd reached the top. "You," the copper cried, still trying to regain his footing. "I'll get you yet, you little scoundrel. Zinni made a show of turning left, but once she knew she was hidden among the knots of people that still crowded the thoroughfare, she dashed right, down Castle Hill towards the High Street. The sun had dropped below the horizon now, but there was still a faint glow in the air, even with a heavy blur of rain clouds gathering overhead. The late stalls were out, selling the leftover scraps that only the desperate would buy. This was old Edinburgh. There were a lot of desperate people here. "Zinni!" Sadie was peeking out from the shadows of St. Giles. Zinni looked around, but there was no sign of the policeman. He'd not find them now, not in this crowd. "Are you all right?" Sadie asked as Zinni reached her. "Fine," Zinni said. "Where's Nell?" Sadie shook her head. "Don't know. She'll hide somewhere for a bit. You did say." Zinni nodded. "All right, she's got the watch, though. If I take it to him now, we might be able to afford some supper." Just the thought of food made her stomach rumble. There hadn't been enough bread for them all to eat that morning, so Zinni had given Nell her own share. Now, though, hunger gnawed at Zinni's empty insides like a sharp-toothed rat. "Come on," said Sadie. "He's long given up. Let's go home." They'd only got as far as the entrance of Writer's Court when they spotted Nell further down the whipped-in street. She had her back up against the wall, staring at the man looming over her. "That's Bartholomew Talbot," Sadie hissed. Despite herself, Zinni's heart turned over. Bartholomew Talbot, a terrible, cruel man. She usually tried to stay as far from him as possible, but she couldn't let him hurt Nell. "Talbot," Zinni said, running up to step between him and Nell. "What do you want?" "What's it to you?" "You don't mess with my sisters. You should know that by now." Talbot's face twisted into a sneer as his gaze flicked between Nell and Zinny. "Sister," he said, "I don't think so." Zinny lifted her chin so that she could look him in the eye. She slipped her fingers into her pocket and pulled out her knife, flicking it open without looking away. "Let her go." Talbot narrowed his eyes. "I think you've got a death wish, girlie, threatening me with that little trinket. I was just asking your sister a polite question is all. About that wee glint of silver I can see in her pocket there. Got a notion it ain't hers, see?" "It's not," Zinny agreed, "but it isn't yours either, and I'm about to make sure it gets back to its rightful owner. Bet that's not something you'd do, is it? In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it were you that nicked it from the gent who's missing it in the first place." Talbot smiled again, but his eyes were as cruel as ever. "You'd best be careful, my wee lambs. Watch yourselves, all right?" He turned and jerked his head. One by one, 4 big men slid out of the shadows to flank him. Talbot gave Nell a rot-toothed grin. Then he and his cronies were gone, barging their way through the bustle on the Royal Mile. "Oh," said Nell, throwing her arms around Zinny's waist and almost knocking her over. "I'll never be as brave as you, Zinny. I'll never be able to stand up to Talbot like you do." Zinny snapped her knife closed and put it back in her pocket before hugging Nell. "I'd rather you never saw him again," she said. "But if you do, there's no shame in running away, Pippin. I'd rather you do that than ever face the likes of Bartholomew Talbot alone. You see him coming, you run, all right?" "All right," said Nell, and began to cough. "Nell," Sadie asked with a frown. "It's just the running, that's all." Sadie pressed a hand to Nell's forehead. "You're hot." Nell huffed. "Of course I am. You pulled me up those steps so quickly I thought I was flying." Zinny retrieved the watch from Nell's pocket. "Take her home," she told Sadie. "I'll get rid of this and be back with something for us all to eat before you know it." Sadie nodded and took Nell's hand. Zinny watched them go, then turned down the mile, making for the curving turn of Coburn Street and the elegant squares of the new town beyond. If you'd like to read more, you can buy a copy of The House of Hidden Wonders from your local bookshop, and also you should be able to find it in libraries as well. I hope you enjoy the read.